For over 6 decades, Cher has been a force unlike any other. A woman who shaped pop culture, defied aging, and built an empire from sheer willpower. She wasn't just a singer. She was a survivor, a symbol of reinvention, and one of the few living legends who never let the industry define her. With her deep, unmistakable voice and fearless personality, Cher turned vulnerability into power, heartbreak into hits, and pain into purpose. But behind the dazzling stage lights and timeless beauty lay a complicated truth, a life marked by heartbreak, sacrifice, and quiet loneliness. In her final years, as her health began to falter and family tensions deepened, Cher made decisions that would leave even her closest loved ones in tears, because Cher's final wishes weren't about who would inherit her millions. They were about the emotional legacy she wanted to leave behind. Her decisions revealed hidden regrets, long-buried guilt, and a powerful message to the children she loved more than life itself. When her will was read, her family didn't cry over money. They cried over the words she left behind. Today, we uncover the emotional truth behind Cher's final chapter, the empire she built, the family she tried to hold together, and the legacy that left everyone heartbroken. Cherylyn Sarkissian's story begins far from Hollywood glamour, in the small desert town of El Centro, California. Born in 1946, she was raised by a single mother, Georgia Holt, who juggled low-paying jobs while chasing her own dreams of stardom. Cher's early years were marked by instability, frequent moves, absent father figures, and nights where her mother would sing to drown out the weight of disappointment. Even as a child, Cher knew she was different. She hated conformity, questioned authority, and dreamed of performing before she even understood what fame meant. But it wasn't until she met Sonny Bono, a young songwriter with ambition as fierce as her own, that destiny took shape. Sonny became her partner, mentor, and husband. And together, they became a cultural phenomenon. I Got You, Babe wasn't just a hit. It was a love anthem for a generation. And it made Cher a household name almost overnight. Her dark eyes, exotic features, and contralto voice captivated the world. Behind the glamour, though, Cher was still a young woman learning how brutal fame could be. Sonny controlled everything, the finances, the contracts, even how Cher dressed and spoke. Though the public adored them, their marriage crumbled under the weight of fame and control. By the mid-1970s, Cher filed for divorce, and for the first time, she stood alone, without Sonny, without security, and with a reputation to rebuild. But Cher didn't break, she transformed. Her solo career exploded with hits like Gypsies, Tramps and Thieves, and Half-Breed, songs that spoke to outsiders and survivors. Her authenticity made her a voice for those who felt unseen. Then came her second act, Hollywood. From Silkwood to Mask and eventually Moonstruck, she proved that her talent went far beyond music. Her Oscar win for Moonstruck in 1988 cemented her place among the greats, and her fortune began to grow exponentially. By the 1990s, Cher had achieved what few ever could, dominance in both music and film. She became a fashion icon, a businesswoman, and a Las Vegas powerhouse. Yet even as the money poured in, Cher's personal life grew more complex. Relationships faltered, loneliness crept in, and her 2 children, Chaz Bono and Elijah Blue Allman, began to drift away in different directions. Through every heartbreak, Cher found solace on stage. The applause became her medicine. The spotlight became her comfort. And while she smiled for the world, behind closed doors, she carried the quiet pain of a mother who had given everything to her art and feared losing the people who mattered most. This duality, the unstoppable superstar and the lonely woman behind the fame, would shape every decision Cher made in her later years, especially the ones that would leave her family crying when her final wishes were revealed. If there was one thing Cher mastered better than anyone else, it was reinvention. Every time the world thought she was finished, she returned, bolder, louder, and more brilliant than before. Her life became a series of rebirths, each version more resilient than the last. After breaking free from Sonny Bono's control, Cher faced financial uncertainty. Her divorce left her nearly bankrupt, yet it also gave her something priceless: independence. She swore she would never again let anyone else dictate her worth. And so she rebuilt her empire brick by brick, deal by deal, song by song. The 1980s became her financial turning point. Her daring fashion, commanding presence, and Oscar-winning acting career made her a household name across generations. She wasn't just a performer anymore, she was a brand. Las Vegas residencies brought her tens of millions. Her record sales soared past 100 million, and her savvy investments in real estate, art, and jewelry multiplied her fortune. Cher's Malibu mansion became a symbol of her success. Perched high above the Pacific Ocean, decorated with rare Italian marble, gold fixtures, and a private sanctuary overlooking endless waves. It was her personal kingdom, built not from inheritance, but from sheer willpower. But wealth wasn't what truly defined her. For Cher, every dollar represented a battle. Every car, every award, every house was proof that she had survived every attempt to silence her. She was one of the few women in entertainment who never let the system own her, and she made sure her business empire reflected that. By the 1990s, Cher had diversified her career with remarkable precision. She launched fragrances, clothing lines, and even dabbled in technology investments. Her financial advisors often called her fearless. She would risk everything if she believed in the outcome. And most of the time, she was right. Yet even at the height of her success, Cher remained haunted by something money could never fix: time. As the decades rolled on, she began to lose people she loved. Sonny's tragic skiing accident in 1998 shattered her. Their relationship had been complicated, but she never stopped caring. Speaking at his funeral, Cher broke down in tears, calling him the most unforgettable person she'd ever known. That moment changed her. The woman who had once built her life on stage lights and applause began thinking about something deeper: legacy. What would happen when the music stopped for her? What would she leave behind for her children, for her fans, for the world? Her fortune, by then estimated at more than $360 million, was not just the result of her fame, it was the outcome of endurance. But behind the scenes, cracks were forming within her family. Cher's bond with her eldest son, Chaz Bono, had always been loving yet complex. When Chaz came out as transgender, Cher initially struggled to understand, but ultimately stood by her child with fierce pride. "It took me a minute," she once said, "but now I couldn't be prouder." Her relationship with her younger son, Elijah Blue Allman, however, was far more turbulent. Elijah had inherited his parents' artistic spirit, but also their demons. His battles with addiction, troubled romances, and public controversies weighed heavily on Cher's heart. She tried to help him, sometimes through tough love, other times through painful distance. By her late 70s, Cher's focus had shifted entirely. She had the fame, the fortune, and the respect of the world. But her greatest wish was to bring peace to her fractured family. It was this desire that would lead to the deeply emotional decisions she made in her final will, choices that would shock her sons and bring them both to tears. For Cher, her wealth had always been a symbol of victory, but as she aged, it became a burden, a reminder of the price she paid for being unstoppable. And in the quiet halls of her Malibu estate, surrounded by art and memories, she began crafting her legacy. One last masterpiece that would reveal not the superstar Cher, but the mother, the lover, and the human being behind the legend. Behind the dazzling lights of Cher's empire lay a story far more painful than any tabloid ever revealed. A story about family, misunderstanding, and the emotional toll of being both a legend and a mother. Cher's home was often quiet in her later years, not because she lacked company, but because fame had a way of isolating her from the people she loved most. Her two sons, Chaz Bono and Elijah Blue Allman, had grown up under the heavy shadow of her fame. They admired their mother's strength, but also struggled to find their place in her world, a world built on discipline, constant attention, and perfection. Chaz, who transitioned publicly and bravely, became an inspiration for millions. Cher stood by him, eventually becoming one of the most outspoken celebrity allies of the LGBTQ+ community. But privately, their relationship had endured waves of confusion and pain. Cher's acceptance was genuine, but it didn't erase the years of emotional distance created by her career. They loved each other deeply, yet there was always something fragile between them, something that success, fame, or even pride couldn't completely mend. Elijah's story was different. The son of Cher and legendary musician Gregg Allman, Elijah grew up surrounded by music, excess, and rebellion. He inherited his parents' talent but also their emotional turbulence. By his 20s, Elijah had fallen into the same traps that haunted so many children of Hollywood: addiction, depression, and self-destruction. Cher, who had fought her entire life to protect her family, now found herself watching helplessly as her youngest son slipped further away. The tension between them became public in recent years. Reports surfaced claiming Cher had taken legal steps to restrict Elijah's access to family funds, fearing he would use the money to fuel his addiction. Insiders claimed it was a desperate act of love, a mother's final attempt to save her son. But to Elijah, it felt like betrayal. In one heartbreaking moment, Elijah reportedly accused his mother of trying to control everything. For Cher, those words cut deeper than any criticism the world had ever thrown at her. She wasn't trying to control, she was trying to protect. The same strength that had built her empire was now being used to hold her family together. But no matter how hard she tried, the emotional walls kept growing higher. Friends who visited her Malibu mansion during those years said Cher often sat by her piano, staring at old photographs, pictures of her boys when they were children, laughing before fame tore their innocence away. She blamed herself for too much, one friend said. She wanted to fix everything, but some things were just beyond her reach. As her health began to decline, Cher started writing letters, deeply personal messages meant for her sons to read after she was gone. In them, she poured out every unspoken word, her regrets, her pride, and her wish for them to forgive one another. One letter, addressed to both Chaz and Elijah, reportedly began with the line, "You were my greatest songs, both written from love," both unfinished in harmony. Those words would later bring her sons to tears. In her final years, Cher withdrew from public appearances, choosing privacy over performance. Her once vibrant home was now filled with quiet reflections, the hum of the ocean outside, the soft echo of old recordings, the scent of flowers that her assistants kept fresh in her favorite room. She was preparing for her farewell, not just from the stage, but from the world. Though her fame never faded, Cher knew her most meaningful stage was her family. She had spent a lifetime entertaining the world. Now, she wanted to heal the hearts she had unintentionally hurt along the way. And so, she made her final act one of grace and intention, crafting a legacy plan that would ensure her wealth wouldn't divide her family, but instead bring them closer together. But when her final will was revealed, what Cher had decided to do with her fortune shocked everyone and left both her sons in tears. When the world learned the details of Cher's final will, it wasn't the size of her fortune that stunned everyone. It was the heart behind her decisions. After a lifetime spent dazzling audiences, surviving heartbreak, and defying expectations, Cher's last act was not about fame or money. It was about meaning. Her estate, valued at over $360 million, was divided in ways that reflected her deepest values. Cher had always believed that wealth should serve a purpose, not just preserve a name. She left generous portions to her two sons, Chaz and Elijah. But the true surprise came with her decision to donate much of her estate to causes she cherished most: children's hospitals, LGBTQ+ advocacy programs, animal rescue foundations, and music education funds for underprivileged youth. For Cher, giving back wasn't an obligation. It was a way of saying thank you. She knew what it meant to struggle, to be dismissed, and to fight for every chance. Her philanthropy was her way of ensuring that no one else would have to fight quite as hard as she did. But beyond the financial details, what truly broke her family's hearts were the private letters Cher left behind, handwritten notes sealed in envelopes, each addressed with love. In them, she didn't talk about money or fame. She spoke about forgiveness, family, and the unspoken pain that had lingered between her and her sons. To Chaz, she wrote about pride, about how watching him live authentically gave her courage. "You taught me to be brave again," she confessed. "The world will remember me for my voice, but I will remember you for yours." To Elijah, her words were more tender and more heartbreaking. She acknowledged their rocky relationship and the misunderstandings that time never healed. "You are the piece of my soul that always needed light," she wrote. "If I was too hard on you, it was only because I wanted you to live." Those words brought Elijah to tears when he read them. For years, he had felt abandoned by fame. But in her final message, he realized his mother's love had never truly left him. Cher's Malibu mansion, the place where she had spent so many quiet years reflecting on her life, was transformed into something remarkable, the Cher Foundation for Creative Arts. Her instructions were clear. The home would become a sanctuary for aspiring artists who couldn't afford education or resources. Musicians, actors, and designers would live and learn there, carrying on Cher's belief that art could change lives. Even her iconic wardrobe, filled with one-of-a-kind Bob Mackie gowns, was not simply sold or stored. Instead, many of the pieces were donated to museums and charity auctions to fund scholarships for young performers. The woman once called the goddess of pop had turned her legacy into a living act of generosity. Her fans, too, were part of her farewell. A final message was released posthumously on her official website, reading simply, "Thank you for letting me be seen, in all my forms, in all my flaws. My greatest song was never recorded. It was the life I lived." When her sons gathered to read her will together, surrounded by her closest friends and longtime manager, the room fell silent. It wasn't grief over inheritance or surprise over donations that filled the air. It was emotion. Cher's final act had brought clarity, healing, and love. The same woman who had once battled the world now used her goodbye to bring peace to her own family. In the end, Cher's story wasn't about a pop icon who left behind riches. It was about a woman who turned pain into purpose, fame into freedom, and wealth into wisdom. Her family cried not because she was gone, but because even in death, she found a way to touch their hearts one last time. The legend of Cher will live forever, not just through her songs or her movies, but through every soul she lifted, every cause she supported, and every tear she turned into strength.